there's so many people that never actually holistically and fully claim their story out of number one, fear of how that's going to impact their family. I definitely have been there and actively have to fight against that every single time I come on this mic, right?
Our story is I feel terrible. Our story is I'm a bad person. I am a shameful person. We get so wound up in the emotions of it all. Me too. I'm still on my healing journey from this. Our story is bound up in shame, and that's all we can see, or in hurt, or in the feelings about ourselves. Hey everybody, it's Bianca.
Welcome back, Evolvers. It is Emilia.
You said that you have a story that you want to use to get us started. And what I will say before you dive into that story is self sabotage is a detrimental pattern. And I have yet to meet a person who hasn't done it at least once. This is something that we all struggle with. This is a pattern that has really harmed and hindered every single one of us. And your ability to really identify these patterns and these cycles and to do something about it and really adaptively change it, it's not only going to save your life, it's going to help you be able to thrive in life. And what we're going to be diving into today is why we do this and what you can do to get out of it. And this might be in a different lens than what you've heard people talk about before.
For
So
sure. Yeah.
just add a little caveat there. Tell us your story.
Yeah. So a couple months ago, I had joined in and had met a great group of people who were part of my trauma cohort. And we initially, when we kind of got into class, there was a couple breakout sessions where a lot of people introduced themselves. And when I got into that group, I started freaking out. I was like, oh God, here we go. Here's who Emilia is and my story, which essentially my central nervous system goes straight up into flight mode
Mhm.
all day, every single day. My palms get sweaty, my heart rate starts going up, and the thoughts come in and go out. And it's really, really hard. Sometimes I experience a little bit of disassociation. And I was entering into the Zoom room, waiting for other people to jump in. And I'm like, what the hell is my story? Like, what story do I want to share with all of my colleagues who I'm going to be sharing some of the most deep, intimate things with? And we're going to be talking about trauma. And it was this very fearful part that was like, it was just so anxious. And I wasn't the first person that shared their story. And when I heard one of my colleagues share his story, it totally changed the way in which I saw self sabotage. Because, quite
Mhm.
frankly, in that moment, my parts were freaking out and getting real ready to totally sabotage what I had intended for this education, for this track, this career of mine. Just in that simple little exercise, tell me a little bit about who you are and your story. And my colleague, he went into his story and he said that long story short, he is someone who was recovering from post traumatic growth. And he is an active person who is in this course because of the fact that he knows that when you can recover from your trauma in a healthy, adaptive manner that can allow other people to see how much courage comes after experiencing adversity, it
Mhm.
it does something to you in a healing way that it's like indescribable. And he had mentioned how he was an active military and he on on that active duty, he had been, as a result of the role that he had, forced to do some really horrible things. One of
Oh.
which included ending people's lives that were male, female, and children, and how that trauma had haunted him for years years and years of his life, and how it totally, after coming back from service and that mission, how it totally changed his world and the trauma that there ensued and how he coped with that. And what he shared in his story, I like everyone in the room, you could just see like everyone was like, holy crap. You think that you've heard it all. And then there are courageous people that lean into their vulnerability. And instead of choosing to self sabotage and hide from their story, they choose to lean into it. They choose to share it. And they choose to be open hearted with what that narrative is. And so when I had heard his story afterwards, got really shook up, and I was like, I can't even imagine what that must be like, having had experienced that level of trauma, the guilt afterwards, like all of those emotions that are extremely complex. And then it
Brutal.
came around to me, and I essentially said, "Hi, I'm Dory, AKA, I'm Emilia, and whenever we do these intros, I get super nervous because a lot of my story has to do with my memory being absolute crap and not and that broke up the way in which my story has tried to come together." And so I share a little bit of this, not only my colleague's story, and afterwards he had shared with us that he's done TED Talks on this, and it's been a really big component of his own active recovery in his life, of sharing his story and being vulnerable and actually not sugarcoating his life when he talks to people about his story. And I'm just like sitting over here like, holy crap, the vulnerability that that takes to repeat your story is unimaginable. So I
Yeah.
share that because what I learned from that after really digging into, oh, okay, what we share with the world is a compilation of the narratives that we have internally of what had happened to us, what we went through, our perspective on it. And that narrative, depending on the state that we're in and the influences that we have that encourage us or uh, discourage us from leaning into what our story is what can literally change our entire world. I was thinking about it after that B, where I was like, imagine if he didn't have people around him that encouraged him to lean into his story. Imagine how different his life would be. And he had shared, very intimately, like, had I not taken the time to recognize that me self-sabotaging would be me not ever telling my story, me not ever having the courageous moment to step in and say, I got to do a TED talk about this. I got to share with other people what it's actually like instead of pretending and cowering in the corner in my guilt and my shame and my blame. And so this, the real reason why we self-sabotage, it really does come down to something so profound, so simple yet so complex, which is the narratives that we have.
It's the story you have, the story you tell yourself about yourself, and the way that you navigate the world as a result of that.
Mhm. Yeah. Imagine, like, if he told himself a different story that was, "I will never be able to recover from this trauma," and then he has other people reinforcing that narrative, he would have never had that courageous moment to step forward and to create what's called a cover story for his trauma, right? Not going into the nasty, gruesome details, but really sharing a cohesive narrative of what had happened in his life.
I guarantee he did have people validating his harmful story. Like, we just in the media and the news, I have clients who have literally told me, I've never had a single person actually say to my face these things, but you see it everywhere. And it's hard not to believe that this is what people really believe when you see it all over the news, all over social media, and you hear other people talking about it.
Yeah.
Like, people will probably label him as a quote unquote murderer
Yeah.
or something like that, or like, oh, military is this and whatever. It's hard not to adopt that, which is why developing your core story and really doing that trauma narrative work that allows you to stop self-sabotaging. I have
Mhm.
a client that I'm doing this with. I mean, I have many clients that I'm doing this with, but one in particular, what I'm having her do is story form write out her life. What
Yeah.
happened to you? What are the things that you experienced? What did you go through that led you to be in the place that you're at right now? Because what most of us tend to do
Mhm.
is we adopt and we maintain the emotional state of how we feel about ourselves, and that becomes so enmeshed in our story. So our story is I feel terrible.
Mhm.
Our story is I'm a bad person. I am a shameful person. We get so wound up in the emotions of it all. Me too. I'm still on my
Mhm.
healing journey from this. Our story is bound up in shame, and that's all we can see, or
Mhm.
in hurt, or in the feelings about ourself. I have so many clients, they can't even remember what they experienced. They just know how they feel. And
Right.
because they only know how they feel, they assume that it's the truth. They're using emotional reasoning to
Mhm.
say, I've been there too. I am bad. Why? Well, I just am because I feel it. Yeah, but why?
Mhm.
Well, I don't have a story. It's true and I feel this way, so it must be true. Navigating your story and really understanding what actually happened to me. Why did I do the things that I did? Not, "Oh
Mhm.
my god, what's wrong with me? Why'd I do that?" Like, no. What happened to me? What were the experiences that I went through? What were the messages that I learned? What did I hear? How did I respond to that? Now, I wanna add a caveat here, okay, because I know a lot of people are gonna think this, and I wanna call this out.
Mm.
This doesn't justify and excuse bad behavior. We're
Yeah.
not saying, like, we're not saying, "Oh, well, they were hurt, so it's okay that they hurt somebody else." No,
No.
that's not the truth at all. The truth is you need to understand why you did it so you don't do it again. So you can call yourself out and say, "You know what? I was wrong. I
Mhm.
hurt people. I was hurt, and as a result of it, I hurt people. And here's why. This is what happened, and now I'm gonna take this road so that I never do this again." This is something that it takes a lot of self-awareness. It takes so much courage and vulnerability to actually let yourself look in the mirror and acknowledge, "Look at these things that I've been through.
Mhm.
Look at what I did. Look at what people did to me." And not running away from it, because it's easy to run away from it. Like, if you had run away from your memory issues, if you continued running away from it, we wouldn't be here right now.
Facts. Absolutely.
Your memory issues were so bad. The reason Emilia called herself Dory was because you would say something to her and she literally would forget what you said 2 minutes later.
Less than that.
Like,
Seconds.
literally Dory.
Yeah.
If you didn't have the courage and the vulnerability to really face that truth, to tell your story, to say, "This happened to me.
Yeah.
I experienced really horrific trauma as a child, and this happened, and then this happened, and then I did this, and then I did all of these things that also contributed to it."
Right.
You wouldn't have been able to then do the work to overcome that, and then to help
Mm.
so many other people do the same, and it sounds like that's what this person in your trauma class, your cohort, also did. He really faced it. Yes,
Yeah.
I made the choice to join the military. I did horrible things because I thought I'm assuming
Yeah, yeah.
here, but I'm just gonna imagine that this was his narrative.
Yeah.
I wanted to serve my country. I love my country. I'm grateful that I live here, and I wanted to serve my country, and as
Mhm.
a result of that, I also did horrific things that I never imagined I would do.
Mhm.
And I
Yeah.
thought I was doing it for the right reasons, and now that I'm out of it, I feel so X, Y, and Z about it.
Mhm.
That is so powerful.
Holy
When you
Chicago
can
it is.
Because when you can own your story, you stop being plagued by it. It's not the pendulum swinging over your head anymore that it's going to drop at any point. You actually get to take control of it.
Evolve Ventures has a tremendous amount to offer. Not only do they have an ever-growing but still welcoming private Facebook society full of like-minded individuals, they also offer individual coaching. I myself have been coached by both Bianca and Emilia on separate occasions, and it's amazing to look back even a year ago in my life and see how far I've come. You almost don't notice that you're doing better for yourself over time. Not to mention, Out of the Mud, free live virtual event once a month. Can't think of a better way to spend a Wednesday night. You truly can encapsulate the value that it carries unless you've been there yourself and been part of the conversations and the connections that happen and just access to that kind of information. The resources are just incredible.
And again, I say this as somebody who is in recovery of this, and I'm still doing my own work on this, and that's okay, but that's also why I can speak on this, because I know how hard it is to face your story.
Yeah.
I know from deep, deep personal experience how brutal it is to look at yourself in the mirror and to really say, I had a huge part in what happened to me. I might have not caused this person to do what they did, but what I did after that, meaning I didn't get help, or I did this, or I did that, or I stayed silent,
Mhm.
that kept me stuck in this pattern.
Yeah.
Last story before we wrap up. I was on a call with a client a couple of days ago. She's 85 years old.
Oh,
I
good
love
for her.
her. She's awesome. And she's a recovering alcoholic, child of sexual abuse from her father. And
Mhm.
she was talking about this concept of resentment and letting go of resentment, and how that's a critical component in AA. You know, there's this mindset, and Wayne Dyer talks about this, there's no justified resentments.
Mm.
And what she said was, there comes a point where you really have to take responsibility for your own resentment.
Mhm.
Can't
Love that.
resent, and you can't put blame on other people. And
Mhm.
I was really curious. I was like, given everything that you've been through, how can you say that?
Mhm.
How can you, as a recovering child of sexual abuse, how can you actually say you're not justified in resenting this person for what they did to you, or you're not justified in the anger and in the sadness and in the horror of what happened to you?
Mm.
And she said, because if I held on to that, I never would have been able to heal.
Yeah,
I
facts.
never would have been able to accept that I stayed quiet. Even when I was an adult, I still didn't say anything about what he did to me.
Mm.
I have to own that, because when I actually owned that, I was able to get help, and I stopped being hurtful to my kids, and
Yeah.
I stopped, unintentionally hurting other people because I was hurt. That's the power of owning your story.
Mhm. So
Full
powerful.
autonomy.
Yeah. There's one other element that I wanna bring into the fold of this because it would be an injustice if I didn't.
Mm,
The aspect of because we are such social creatures and we have a biological imperative to belong, meaning like that is the driver of so many things. When we peel back the layers and really look objectively and rationally and analytically, we just want to belong. We just want to fit in with our tribe. We don't want to stick out from our family, from our friends. We don't want to again go against our culture. All of these norms, these beliefs, these traditions, right? It is really scary and not quote unquote socially functional to claim your own story. And the element that I want to bring in here is that because of that, the courage aspect that you mentioned, it also will take tremendous social courage in claiming your own story, meaning
100%.
shutting down other people's opinions of what had happened. So, how many times I cannot count how many times I've heard from a client Them trying to tell their story, aka their perspective, their unique experience, their series of events in the way in which it was contextualized in their brain, in their emotional footprint, etc., what they had experienced. And then all of a sudden tried to double back and said, well, my sister didn't experience the same thing, so it's not true. Or I don't think that, my parents would really agree with this because from their perspective, blah, 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 blah. This didn't happen, right? There's so many people that never actually holistically and fully claim their story out of number one, fear of how that's going to impact their family. I definitely have been there and actively have to fight against that every single time I come on this mic, right? How it might impact our friends, our siblings, our colleagues, our coworkers, etc., right? Because we're concerned about how our story and us actually fully stepping into that might impact those around us. And there's such an interesting element here because if you have siblings, and B, I know you have siblings, right? All you guys were all raised in the same household, right? You guys all saw one thing, but you saw it from different vantage points, right? If mom
Mhm.
had a blow up, for example, and started throwing the dishes at the wall. I'm not saying this happened in your family, but I'm just saying for an example, right? This was a client that I had. Mom got so upset and started throwing dishes at the wall and screaming at us. From one child's perspective, that's a story.
Yes.
And it's a story that's very different than the story from the other child that was standing closer to the wall. The child that was closer to mom saw mom throwing the dishes at the wall. The child that was standing next to the wall saw mom throwing dishes at her. And so
Woof.
neither of those should be invalidated by others, because
Right.
when we recognize that all of us have our own story and it does not require, nor should it ever require, someone else to validate, that is one of the things that I see holds so many people back, and they self-sabotage their own life because they have gaslit themselves into what they actually experienced, because they took in the opinions, the perspective, and the vantage point of someone else to fill in the gaps when they actually blacked out or when they disassociated. And so that's just something that I personally have experienced and want to make sure that I say on this, because we will, if we're not conscious and aware of how our story is unique to us, we
Mhm.
will actively self sabotage that narrative and have other people write it for us.
It's not only also to fill in the gaps, it's so that they don't it's other people also invalidating and denying and rejecting your story because of the if because what if that actually is true? What does that
Right.
mean about me?
The
To
shame,
the mom
guilt,
to the
blame.
mom who threw those dishes,
Mhm.
what would she have to acknowledge, and how would she feel if she actually admitted, "Oh my god, I threw dishes and it almost hit my child."
Right.
So people have to literally deny your reality so that they can validate their own feelings and their own core story.
Mhm.
This ties into the last episode that we did on how to disentangle from emotionally immature people, and if you haven't heard that, please subscribe to the podcast or the YouTube or wherever you are and go check that episode out, because we really dive into if you are dealing with emotionally immature people, and it usually is emotionally immature people who are going to invalidate your story, how do you disentangle from that? And how do you own your own autonomy and your own story?
Mhm.
Other people are our own biggest issues. Other people are the most beautiful thing that you can have ever. And
Mhm.
if you're surrounded by the wrong people, it's also the worst thing that could ever happen to you. And so
Yeah.
being mindful about number one, who you're telling your story to, because not everybody deserves the right and has earned the right to hear your story.
Facts.
And then number two, you really owning your story and coming from an empowered place in that is going to allow you to be your best self.
Mm.
Because if you tell the wrong person your story, they might invalidate it and it might cause you to self sabotage. If you tell the right person your story, because to use Brene Brown's quote, they've put enough marbles in the marble jar to where they earned your trust, meaning there have been
Mhm.
enough positive bids to where you have mutually earned trust within each other.
Mhm.
Having safe, good people around you actually allows you to heal and own your story and to grow and evolve and to recover. And I know that was a huge component for you. Like Alan
Yes.
coming into your life saved your life. He helped you
Mm.
save your memory and save your
Seriously.
brain by helping you to be mindful of your sleep and watch the narratives that you had about yourself and to really do
Mhm.
that work for you that you were so good at helping other people to do, but you weren't prioritizing for yourself.
Yeah, I didn't even realize I had a fixed mindset and a fixed narrative around my brain, right? My ability to learn and evolve and remember. And that was the only area I was hyper growth minded, had a hyper growth minded narrative in every other area of my life except for that one. And
Yeah.
the greatest blessing of my life, helped me understand that. And that wouldn't have happened if it weren't for the people that I surrounded myself with, right? You helped me get to know
Mhm.
him, right? And it's just such an interesting aspect, like some of the books that I've read around. And I'll give Kendra Hall a little shout out here. She has a book that's called Change Your Story, Change Your Life. I think I recommended
Mhm.
that one for you to read too. A lot
So
of my
good.
clients
It
get that
was so good.
because it helps you actually recognize like you are the writer. You have a pen in your hand and it's actively writing. Like you have parts of you that are actively logging what you're going through and other parts that are actively deleting files of what you're going through. And then are you going to step in or when are you going to step in and be that conscious writer of your own story? And is that story going to serve you? Is that narrative, those inner dialogues, are they serving you? Or can you actually change your story, change the perspective on your narrative? Not necessarily change what happened to you, but change the way in which you think about it. And can that
Mhm.
story change your life? The answer is absolutely yes. I've done it. You've done it. We're on that journey together. And so, for anyone that's watching this episode, one of the real reasons why you self sabotage is because you are not stepping into your story and you're certainly not writing it from a conscious standpoint. And so we challenge, we urge, we invite you to take that step with us to help write your story for you, for future you, and for the people who look up to you. And so in closing, my episode suggestion is going to be 178, the best thing to help you through hard times. B,
Mm.
closing statements and episode suggestion.
Episode suggestion 308. What stories are your inner critic writing? If
Mm,
you do not choose your own story, someone else will choose it for you. And that'll be the narrative you live your life by. And that would be a tragedy. Emilia has done amazing work on herself. I've done amazing work on myself, and I'm still in the
mm,
journey of it. And we want to be able to help you on your way to do that. And there's a really amazing way that you can get started that's low risk, no cost to you. We have the 14-day free trial of our You Do You therapy and or coaching program. It is a really amazing way to dip your toe in and to be able to even share your story, if nothing else, the story in which you currently see it, with a
mm,
safe person who's just going to be there to listen to you. So if that's
mm.
something that you're interested in, please go to evolveventurestech.com/therapy or click the notes in the description and all the information will be there. We cannot wait to help you rewrite your story, and we will see you all next time. Bye, everybody.
Everyone.